Welcome to the Evolution of Mom podcast. We are super excited today to have a guest, Tarryn MacCarthy, on here, who is a busy mom of three, who also has a podcast, The Business of Happiness, and is an orthodontist. So we are very, very excited to have her on and to talk about all things between mom and business and not losing yourself as well.
Yes, absolutely. We are so excited to have this incredible woman here today. Tell us all about it, Tarryn. How did you get started in going from orthodontist and running your own practice and business there to expanding and also blending that with motherhood? How did that come to be?
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm so honored to be on the Evolution of Mom podcast. And I love the mission that you guys have and the message you're putting out there. So I am honored. Thank you. But my story actually starts one day when I kind of woke up and didn't even recognize myself in the mirror. And that terrified me. I realized one day in my 30s that I had been living my whole life kind of chasing one success after another, wishing and hoping that every achievement would bring me happiness and fulfillment. You know, I think when I was young, I had this dream. I loved artistry, I loved creativity, I loved service, I loved science. And so transforming people's smiles just seemed like this beautiful way to do those things. And I loved the idea of owning my own business. And so I remember this feeling when I was younger of just excitement and adventure and feeling like I could do it all. And I kept studying, and really my 20s, I sacrificed to studying and reaching for this dream of becoming a dentist, and lost all concept of self-care and joy and taking time for myself and time for relationships and fun and for my body, and really just poured my heart and soul into becoming a dentist. And then you tell yourself the story, well, when I graduate, then I'll be happy. Then finally I can sit back and enjoy myself. And then I graduated and I was miserable and thought, okay, it's not dentistry, it's orthodontics. I'm going to straighten teeth. I went to an orthodontic practice and everyone was happy. I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. So struggled and fought and pushed and went to orthodontic residency and kept saying to myself, when I get through, then I'll be happy. And then started working as an orthodontist and I was miserable. And then thought, well, no, it's actually practice ownership. When I own my own practice and I can make my own rules, and, fought to make that happen. And then along the way realized, man, this is wholly unfulfilling. I'm stressed, I'm scared. So then I realized, wait a minute, I haven't thought about being a mom. So let me strive to become a mother. And my husband and I actually struggled for years because I'd been putting my own health aside for decades. And so infertility is actually a big, big problem with many successful career-oriented women because they've been neglecting their bodies for so long. So we pushed and struggled, finally got pregnant, and just added more stress and overwhelm to me. And it wasn't until I was pregnant with my second son, I was in enormous debt. My practice was not doing well. My health was at risk. My husband and I were really struggling in our marriage. Everything was falling apart. And I remember waking up one morning and just looking at myself in the mirror and not even knowing who that person was staring back at me. I literally didn't recognize my face. And it terrified me. And I realized something had to change. And what I actually did was run away. I dropped everything. I literally, if I could have run away from my kids, I would have. That was the one thing I knew I couldn't do. But I thought, well, I've got to get out of this marriage. I got to sell this practice. I've got to never be an orthodontist again. I've got to run away from everything because I've been building up something that isn't me. And what happened was, in running away as much as I could, I sold my practice. My husband and I did not separate, but I was really close because I just couldn't see a way out. What I realized was the one thing I couldn't run away from was myself. And she came with me all along the way. And I had to fall back in love with her. I had to find her first. And then slowly I was able to build on that. I had to find myself and fall in love with myself, and then slowly repair all the other relationships with my husband, with my kids, with my passion, with my career, with my business. And now I'm doing the same orthodontics. I have the same kids. I have the same handsome husband. I have all the things that I had before, but everything changed. Everything changed. It wasn't the fancy car and the fancy house that brought me fulfillment. It had to start with me. And, during COVID, when everything locked down, and I saw these incredible women around me who were leading teams of other women, who were leading businesses, beating themselves up and losing themselves in the stress and the overwhelm. In my profession in dentistry, we had to furlough 20, 30 women. I had to, for the first time in my career, tell the women who were relying on me for their income to support their families that they didn't have a job anymore. It was enormously stressful for all women in dentistry and business owners who hired teams that they had to fire indefinitely. We didn't know when it would end. And what I saw was women beating themselves up and losing their confidence and losing their passion and not recognizing that they were actually the leaders that were holding everything together. They were the ones that were picking up the pieces as we were going along. And I remember this moment during the lockdown where everyone felt like, where's our leadership? Where are all the leaders? Where's the guidance? And actually, it was my stepmom, and she sent me a picture of her sewing masks for, remember that time where we were all sewing masks with whatever scraps we had? And she said, Tarryn, the leaders are right here. They're the women sewing masks from scraps in their kitchens that are leading the way. And I looked around and I thought, you know what, she's right. Here are these incredible women who have been running businesses, who have been leading other women, other families, and they've been beating themselves up along the way. And really, they're the ones that are going to bring us out of this. And I thought there has to be another way where women can start re-identifying with their superpower, re-identifying with the incredible power they have to make a difference on the world around them. And it has to start with finding themselves and finding their happy again and finding that joy that sits in our purpose when we create something. That picture I showed you of me when I was young and I had this passion and I wanted to put together artistry and science and I had all this excitement that I lost along the way. It's that nugget that I wanted to reintroduce for women. And that's where the business of happiness came in, is how can we find that excitement and that purpose and that passion that's embedded within each of us and use that to galvanize us to do great things. Because I believe we can do anything. We can be a business owner and a podcaster and a mom and a great wife and not feel frazzled and exhausted and overwhelmed. It is possible.
Oh my goodness. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. What a beautiful story and a beautiful journey you have been on. And when you say, the journey was the stress and you would be happy when, I'll be happy when. As women, we are so terrible for doing that, for not enjoying the process along the way that creates the happiness at the end, right? Mm-hmm. And when our life is crashing down around us, not understanding that we need to turn inward. One of my favorite analogies is when, you're on a flight and the flight attendant, she says, you know what, put your own mask on first. The plane is going to crash. You need to put your own oxygen mask on first, that you can fix everything else around you. When our life is crashing around us, we need to dive into self-care, into self-service, into finding out who we are and aligning back with who we are as individuals so that it can ripple out into those around us and help heal that atmosphere around us from the inside. So you are just such a beautiful example of that. Good for you. That is so exciting.
Thank you. I found that to be so true in such a beautiful example within my 3 kids. So I have 3 children, which, by the way, they're our biggest teachers too. I have Absolutely. To say, every single day I learn so much from my children. And so my first 2 boys, they were born when I was in this stress place and trying to just hold everything together and felt like I was holding up this castle of cards that was about to fall down at any moment. And both my boys were born good 6 weeks before their due date. So they were both very premature. In fact, I was back to work treating patients before their due date. So I had on there, exactly on the calendar, I had the day when I was going to go back to work, and I moved that way back to actually seeing patients before their due date. And what I attribute that to for my own body, and I know we each have different stories, but I was just washing my body with cortisol every single day. And that little baby in there just couldn't stay in there. And my body just couldn't do it all. And so at no point was I able to hold a pregnancy as long as I wouldn't allow my body to do it. And it was so fascinating when I had my third, my daughter, and I had this mindset shift, and I had this revisiting and refinding of myself, and gave myself permission to take care of myself as the vessel this little baby was growing in. Nuala was born 14 days late. And I love that story because for me, it was such a great piece of evidence of how important that is, what you're saying, Amy, to take care of yourself. That analogy of you can't be your best for someone else if you can't take care of yourself first. And that was such a perfect example of that, is that I had to care for this body for myself in order to care for her to the best of my ability. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. We have to, caring for ourselves first is like something that, I mean, Amy and I talk about quite a bit. And that's why we were excited to have you on as well, is to be able to reiterate that message. But you talk about finding yourself and going through that journey. And I mean, we all know how hard that journey can sometimes be. What would you say to somebody who is feeling that way? They're feeling like they don't even recognize themselves. What is the steps that you would take to kind of help start finding yourself?
Well, the first thing is I needed to get very quiet with just myself. I needed to find time with just myself so that I could block out all the judgment and noise and interruption and obligation and perceived expectations of other people, right? And just get super quiet with myself. I started a meditation journey that helped me. It actually started with my daughter when I was getting ready for her in my pregnancy. I started with hypnobirthing. I thought I'd do hypnobirthing for her. And so that actually introduced me to meditation. And meditation for me just meant getting very quiet. And another time when I found that was meditation introduction was running. For me, when I go on long runs, I'm able to just be quiet with myself and nobody else matters. And I can just be alone with my thoughts. But I think that was the very first step, is learning how to be by myself without other people's judgment or my perception of their judgment. And then becoming clear on what's important to me in terms of my values, right? And not judging them. And I've had to do this over and over again throughout my life. And I've had to give myself permission to have my values morph into new ones and take new priorities. You know, I liken it to when you're starting a business, even though you have great value for your children and your family, and those are all very important things in your life, you might have to pour 90 hours a week into your business just to get it launched. Or when you have a baby, even though you have such great value for launching businesses and creating empires, there's no option you're spending 100% of your time with that baby. That's the priority in that moment. So I had to give myself permission to let those values kind of ebb and flow on the list of priorities and not put other people's judgment on it. And I've had to face some really challenging moments where I've realized that I had old stories that were really hurting myself in terms of my own judgment of myself. So for example, one thing that I struggled with for a long time after I had my third child was I knew I wanted to start a new orthodontic practice. I knew I wanted to launch a new career. I didn't want to just be at home all the time with Nuala. I had all these things I wanted to do, but I beat myself up so much telling myself what a mom should or shouldn't be, or how many hours a mom should or shouldn't have with their children during the day. And I had to come to a very clear understanding of what my values were in terms of how I saw myself and what I loved about myself. And that meant that I wouldn't have as many hours in the day for my daughter. And I had to come to terms with that, because if I told myself this number of hours is what has to happen for me to feel good about myself, I was not present for that time. If I was ignoring my values, I wasn't able to be my authentic my authentic self in that moment. I was thinking constantly about what wasn't happening or what I wasn't addressing. And so for me, being an incredible mom, which is so important to me, means something very different from somebody else's very incredible mom. I couldn't be the incredible mom to Nuala without being an incredible person to myself first and honoring my values. But that came at a cost. It sometimes meant I wouldn't be there to put her to bed. And I had to come to an understanding that that was okay, because I was still fulfilling those important values for myself.
That's beautiful. So I have so many things to say about that and so many questions to ask. But I think just on that last note it's really important to understand that when we're not showing up for ourselves in however that looks like for us, we're not showing up as our best self to others. And like you said, being the best mom looks different for everybody. Mm-hmm. And I know that you pouring into yourself, pouring into your passions and your purpose allows you to show up as your best self for your daughter when you do that, for your children when you do that.
Yes.
And we feel the same way.
Yeah.
We absolutely do.
Look at us now. We're here recording this interview on a Sunday. We could tell ourselves this is the day we should be with our kids. I've got to go to work tomorrow morning, but this means so much to me. And being able to honor that value for myself allows me to leave this interview at the end of this interview and be fully present with Nuala, because this is the great thing that being a working mom taught me. And this is where, Amy, I take my hat off to you as a stay-at-home mom. I couldn't do this. But being a working mom creates for me really clear boundaries. And when we honor those boundaries, we get enormous success. I tell the story of when I was first in practice and the boys were little. And as little boys and girls will do, you leave the house and mommy, don't leave. Please don't leave. I haven't seen you. You've spent all weekend with them. you've basically slept in bed with them. And please, I miss you. I'm going to miss you. And it tugs at our heartstrings so much. And then we beat ourselves up all drive to work and feel bad. And wow, and I'm a terrible mom and I wish I didn't have to work. And now we start resenting work. We start resenting society for making me work. We start resenting the man who's making me work or not allowing me to work. And we show up to work and we're already in this place of anger and resentment. And now we start our day. And then what I found myself doing was, well, if I'm going to be at work, I got to put in 125% into this day to make it worth it. This better be worth it now. So I got to do all the things and then some so that I don't feel so bad about leaving my kids at home. So we push through, and I used to push through lunch and work through lunch and force things all day long. Charisse, we were talking about earlier about a masculine mindset. I was used to put that in place big time. Like, I'm going to attack this day. And then you leave work depleted, exhausted, overwhelmed, stressed out. Nothing got accomplished. My to-do list was way unrealistic. So it feels wholly unfulfilling, leaving it so empty. And now I drive home with that attitude. And when I get home, man, these kids keep wanting more. I can't give anymore. I've got nothing left. And now you want more from me? Don't you know what I've been through today? Don't you know that I'm exhausted? God forbid I get into bed and my husband turns over and wants to start snuggling. Really? I got nothing left. And that story I find is so common and so predictable. And it's tears my heart. Like, I could be brought to tears just remembering that feeling, because nothing feels good and nothing can feel good until you can really give yourself those boundaries. And so although I say being a working mom allows me that, only if you honor it, only if you give yourself permission to say, sweetheart, I love you so much when I'm leaving in the morning. And this is what mommy does. This is what gets me excited. And I love you so much. And tonight when I come home, you're going to have a fulfilled mom when you come home, and leaving knowing I've done the very best for them. I've put childcare into place. I love the person they're with. They're going to learn new tools. They're going to get new experiences that they couldn't with just me. They're going to learn a new, new skill, and letting that go and having compassion and pride in the choices that I've made. And if the choice stinks, change it. All right, let's find you a new way. But then showing up to work, being ready to enjoy and appreciate the day and get so much fulfillment out of it. I learned that one of my biggest love language is quality time, which is why I love this. Thank you for this quality time. But I learned that I love quality time. So every moment I was with a patient was my quality time. And I acknowledged it. I was like, oh, I'm going to soak this up. I got you all to myself. I'm going to give you quality time and you're going to give me quality time. And at the end of the day, I was like, wow, I got so much filling of my bucket. I just got so much that fed my soul because I was honoring that love language, honoring that need, honoring my values. And then I'd drive home with the music playing because I felt like a rock star and walk into the house. And now, sweetheart, I'm all yours. I can be there for you because I feel great about myself instead of resenting myself and my decisions and the world and the weather and the people and the kids and the patients, but rather appreciating the power I have of choice and recognizing how important my desires are along the way. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Like, it's so good. It's one of the, like, for me in that morning routine, at first, when I was asking my kids to go back into their room and be like, no, this is mom's time. This is my boundary. I would feel guilty for asking that. But it's so funny because when I take that space and I end up having that like hour to myself and they come out at 7 in the morning, I'm like, good morning. I'm so excited to see you. Right.
The best mom ever. Yes.
Right. And it's like big hugs and they have big smiles on their faces because I'm acknowledging them when they're walking into the room instead of me sleeping and then being like, oh, you guys are up, like, and being instantly resentful that I'm now tired and I haven't got that, like, it, because the way we set up our day affects us all the way through, right? When you're going to bed in that space and then your kids wake you up in the morning, you're tired, you're empty, you're exhausted. And then you wake up in the morning, you're resentful of them, right?
Absolutely.
And so nobody's getting that presence and that quality time.
And what are you teaching them is success. You know, that was another wake up moment for me one day, because there was a time in my life where that exhaustion and that depletion, I needed an escape from. And this is another thing many women will understand is when you exhaust yourself and deplete yourself and you get home and you just need to escape. I resorted to drinking. To me, that was my vice. And so a glass of wine, I'd walk in the door, where's the wine? You know, and eventually for me, that became a problem. And I began to realize that what I was doing is using alcohol as an escape and a crutch. And it gave me permission to slow down because I couldn't learn how to slow down myself. And that's what alcohol was providing me with. But I remember very clearly one night pouring my second glass of wine, because very quickly, one glass, now I needed two every single night. And I remember pouring that second glass of wine and looking over at my daughter and recognizing what I was teaching her in terms of success. Here I was trying to raise a daughter who would be an enormous success herself, as I would expect from my boys as well. But I was teaching them, you go, you sacrifice, you push, you do things you don't want to do, you leave your family behind, and then you come home and you drink because that's the only way to escape. And then you get your kids to bed as quickly as you can, because I had nothing left and the alcohol robbed me of the last little bit that I had. And then I just got them to bed. And then I'd wake up in the morning feeling enormously guilty that I didn't read a book to bed or snuggle with them for 2 minutes. And it was that recognition of, what am I teaching my kids? What am I teaching them the definition of success is? How am I teaching them to manage this overwhelm? I'm showing her that the answer is alcohol. And even in this little 3-year-old's mind, I could see what I was showing her. And that scared me too. And I think that those moments when you realize that something needs to shift, and you talk about this on your podcast, that messy moment is also an enormous learning point, even though that felt horrifying to me. Like, oh my God, what have I been doing? At that point, Finn was 10. For 10 years, I'd been showing this pattern, wholly ingrained in his psyche. They say by age 8, they've already learned everything. And I had to come to terms with that and realize that, no, this is the turning point for me. This is a new awareness, and give myself compassion for having led that journey up to that point, because we don't know until we know. But man, when you know it's time to change, it's time to change. And so teaching our children that formula for success is important as well. And it's interesting because sometimes it takes seeing how it's affecting your children to be painful enough to make a change in yourself.
Yeah. That's absolutely. That's exactly, it was the same thing that sparked change in me. And I fully look at my kids as like part of my soul's growth for evolution. And it shows me where those parts are that I still need to grow and develop. But it's the same thing. I was like, if I have to think about the women that my boys are going to attract into their life, and who like what their definition of what a mom is, this like, I'm going to people please and take care of everybody else and be that martyr. I'm like, I don't want that for their wives.
Mm-mm.
Right. So it's using that as an inspiration, but that guilt that's underneath when you first started to take time, like how do you overcome that? Because that is one thing that stops moms a lot of times from going further.
I know. Isn't mom guilt such a big thing?
Oh, huge.
It's huge. And it's because we're so passionate about raising our children properly or kindly or to the best of our ability. And so whenever I feel that moment of guilt, I've had a huge relationship with guilt throughout my whole life that has negatively impacted my ability to act in a positive and impactful way. And every time I feel that old wolf of guilt, kind of growling behind me, I try to remind myself that what that is just an indicator of the passion that I have. So my story with guilt, actually, when I really recognized what guilt was in my life, my brother passed away. My brother took his life in 2016. And when he passed away, more than missing him, if I were to be honest with you, more than the pain and the loss of losing my little brother, of losing Douglas, was the guilt. The guilt overwhelmed it. The guilt was so much more painful. And the guilt is what made me mourn for him much longer than I really should have, because I just felt so guilty. I felt so responsible for him and for his life and for the choices he made. And the same is true with parenting. I think sometimes we carry so much guilt around a decision we made or an action that we took that it prevents us from moving forward, right? It clouds our judgment from being able to move forward in a proactive way. And what I was able to do when I was missing Douglas and mourning in the loss of my brother was recognize that it prevented me from seeing the beauty of what we had. It robbed me of the passion that I had for Douglas and the love that we had for one another. By focusing on the guilt, I lost all the incredible gifts that he gave me in his whole life. In his 35 years, I was negating all of that and focusing just on my guilt. And I could see how hurtful that was, because I was letting go of all the gifts that he actually did give me and all the gifts that we still had as siblings and as people who love one another now in this moment. And the same is true in parenting. I think if we focus too much on the guilt and we sit and we dwell on that guilt and that pity party about what happened and what I should have done differently and how I should have said it or what I shouldn't have done, we lose sight of what the potential is going forward. So it's that, how can I take the lesson and leave the pain? Set the pain aside. And I don't mean that there's not a time for grief and there's a time to take a moment to give yourself time to heal, but there's a time to put it down as well, and a time to learn from it and to have gratitude for it. I look back now at that enormous weight of grief and I think, gosh, I learned so much from that. Thank you for that. I learned how to focus on positivity and moving forward beyond grief. And the magic there, to answer your question, Charisse, is looking at it as knowing that the only reason you feel so deeply about it is because you feel so deeply about it, because it matters so much, because you value it so much. You know, we don't miss someone who we never really cared for. We don't feel badly about something that really didn't matter. You know, I knocked over that glass of milk. Okay, not a big deal. But man, it matters so much if I think it hurt my son's feelings, or if I said something that I think he may have taken the wrong way. And that just is an indicator light, almost like a little light on your car dashboard. Like, wait a minute, this matters to you. And that's okay. It's okay to do something differently next time. So I try to look at it as an indicator. When guilt comes up, I try to look at it as a little shining star telling me how important this is in my life, and actually maybe more important than I ever thought before. Yeah.
I love that. It's amazing how much we allow ourselves to live in that space of past guilt, of past things we could change, and it affects everything going forward, instead of affecting things going forward in a beautiful learning growth way. We allow that guilt to change the space moving forward. We hold on to it, and we can't do better unless we know better. When you know better, you do better, but you can't hold yourself in this space of, but I didn't know anything. I didn't know better back then, so now I'm a jerk. Well, you didn't know.
Nope.
You didn't know. So all you can do is have excitement and happiness and gratitude for that, you know, now, and you can change and have that as a catalyst moving forward.
Yep.
And, you know, we use these, I'm going to use air quotes again, as like bad experiences and negative emotions and things in as a negative, which, I mean, in the moment and in the muck of it, they're very hard. But when you can come out of it from a space of learning, of gratitude, of seeing the moments that it has caused, it changes the trajectory moving forward always. And I know people use loss as a big one of, there's no positive here. You say that there's always positive and a negative, but they say that this loss, there's no positive, but there's always beautiful things that can come from any kind of trauma, any kind of negativity, when we're ready to see them. It's okay if you can't see them right from the get-go, but be open to having that moving forward, because that's what changes the trajectory moving forward. Like you said earlier, your day was the same. You were still leaving the kids in the morning, still going to work, still coming home, still putting them to bed. Same day, different outcome, different mindset. And all that really had to change was you finding joy in all of that, and you finding grace, and you finding that fulfillment in it within yourself, so that it could project outwards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that there's a lot to be said for compassion for yourself as well, you know, in the moment. And I know what you're talking about in terms of when you're in a really low place, it's very hard to hear, there'll be a lesson at the end of this, you know, especially, I know, my mom works with a lot of cancer survivors, and they don't want to hear that there's a purpose for cancer. They don't want to hear that there's a lesson in this, in that moment. And the same is true for when you lose a loved one. I don't want to hear that there's a lesson here, but having compassion for yourself and giving yourself time, but then also giving yourself the time to move forward beyond that, because we're so much more than what happened to us. And that was a big eye opener to me as well. You know, we tend to create these stories of definition of moments that have happened to us: infertility, loss of a brother, cancer, you know, whatever it is, we create that as our identity, instead of seeing that it's just a small part of who we are. And we actually have so much more capability beyond that. And that's where I still believe that we can have it all. That seems heavy. And I know that there's so many discussions and conversations around our generation of how women were told, you know, you can have it all. You can have the family, you can have the business. And then you get to the point, you're like, I don't want to do it all. And that's the point. is you can have it all that you want in your life, but you can't have it all that somebody else says you should have, or their description of success or her description of success. You have to design that for yourself. And I'm so passionate about this in terms of rewriting your definition of success, what that looks like for you. And I don't just mean financial success, although that's a big part of it, and something that I think as women, we can learn from men. They're so comfortable with money. They're so comfortable with financial success. And that's another story we tell ourselves. But I think success also has to include your own happiness.
I think that's the only way to be successful.
Absolutely.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's such an important message, like you said, especially for women, is we need to change our definition of success, in that it's not, there are so many people out there who have big homes, fancy cars, and all the things that society views as successful, and they're not happy.
Nope.
They're not happy. That's not the kind of success that brings happiness and joy. You can be in that space and be happy and passionate and purposeful and vibrant, but it really matters on the individual, on how you got there and how, if that's aligned for you even. And so we need to allow women to hold space for, I want to be a stay-at-home mom and be, my children are my 100% focus. That's success to you.
Absolutely.
Being in a career where maybe you only make minimum wage or however that looks for you. But if that brings you passion and purpose and joy, and you feel like you're making a difference in the world and that fulfills you and you're great at it, that's success.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because in the business world, the opposite is true as well, is that happiness brings success.
Mm-hmm.
It does, like real dollars and cents success. And it was something else that I stumbled on when I finally decided to focus on my happiness and my values. All of a sudden, the same business model, the same orthodontics, wholly different in terms of financial success. It became this little touchstone of empowerment that I had intended. And man, I couldn't even believe it just started coming and coming and coming. But once again, it took that first part of happiness. And much to your point, Amy, I am surrounded by people in the business world and in the dental world who are living the society's version of success. They got the extra homes, the extra boat, the extra fancy stuff, and the planes even. Miserable. And that's that morning when I found myself, when I woke up, I had all the things and absolutely miserable. And that's when you start to see everything around you declining, not just your business, but your marriage and your health. And everything just stems from that place of not focusing on your own inner fulfillment. And it's interesting because as women, we're told that's a selfish thing to do, to focus on yourself. And I speak to a lot of women about, we want more and we feel so bad about it. Like, I should just be satisfied. I should just be okay with what is. And there is never a moment where I think any of us should settle, ever. Ever. I don't believe in it. But man, know what you're going after and then love it when you get there. So for me, my definition of happiness is gratitude for all the incredible things around me, just loving what I have, but so eager for more. I just want more. I just want more. And I don't want anyone to tell me that that's not good, because then I feel bad. I want more mornings with my kids. I want more vacations. I want more in my business. I want more with the business of happiness. And it feels so great, but I'm not beating myself up because of it. It's honoring that value of mine that, man, the sky's the limit and it feels good. And when something doesn't feel good, time to change. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Recognizing that. We like to say, thank you, more, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, more, please. We'll take it. Right.
I love that.
And if other people don't take it, well, I'll take it too.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that, because it's honoring the gratitude as well for what is there, right? I have done this. I have this beautiful family. Thank you for this. Or even, and this is a hard one, but gratitude for the tough shit. Gratitude for those painful things, gratitude for the stumbling. And how can I look at this and know that there will be greater purpose in the end?
And the more you go through those hard moments and realize, and when you're aware of them and being aware and having that mindset around, okay, now what was the lesson here? Once you've gone through it and you can see it, the easier it is to keep going through the hard stuff that comes up, because even when you can't see it right away, you know what, I've been through some tough stuff before, but I know there was something that came out of it. So it almost makes it easier every time to go through those hard moments, because you know that there's something on the other side that's going to grow you, make you stronger, allow you to help someone else. And the more you go through it with that mindset, the more true that becomes and the easier it is to get through those things.
Yeah, I love it. I love the idea. Glennon Doyle talks about this, about the traveling professor, that pain is like a traveling professor, and it's unavoidable. We're going to have pain. No matter what, pain is going to be knocking on our door. But how can we welcome that pain in, recognize it for what it is, and then say, okay, thank you for the lesson. Now please leave. But that traveling professor is going to keep coming, and it's going to keep giving us new insights and a better understanding of who we are and what we want. That's the special part, right? Because when we say to ourselves, what do you want in life? Sometimes we don't know. And we try this and we swing this way on the pendulum, and then we try this and then we try this. And we're kind of ping-ponging all over the place. And that's okay, because that traveling professor will keep coming and reminding us, oh yeah, not so much. I need to pull it back a little bit, even in business. And even when you think you found the way, and you guys know with kids as well, like every now and then you're like, all right, I figured it out. And then they turn 5. Or for me, for the longest time, I said to Killian, my husband, I was like, oh my God, we're in such a sweet spot. And then COVID hit and my 14-year-old did this, and you think, I've got it down. And just knowing that there's going to be pain along the way, and every new painful moment is going to bring you a new lesson and closer to your truth.
Yeah, I love that.
I love it too. I think touching now on how women do deserve more and that it's okay. Right?
Yeah.
That is so huge. We started off talking that way in our podcast on how, we have the 2.5 kids, the home, the the stereotypical, this is what should make you happy. And yet there was still something missing. And that's okay. We can't have guilt for that and start to suppress that. We need to explore that and figure out what it is. There's a piece of you that needs to be brought out and shine and developed, because that's what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love to say, when you get the feeling that this isn't enough, it's not enough.
It's not.
You have to trust. You have to trust your intuition. When that feels like, man, this just doesn't feel like enough. Is there more to life? There is. There is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And you had the courage to ask yourself that question, right? Like, why do I have all these things, but I'm still not happy at the end of the day? And I think that's important, right? Having the courage to ask yourself the tough questions when the painful moments come up.
And then to be brave enough to hear the answer, because sometimes the answer shocks you. For me, that was that mirror, like, oh, I guess I'm going to be okay with sometimes not putting my daughter to bed. Like, that is going to be something I have to be okay with, because I'm better able to be a better mom in the moments that I do put her to bed, when I honor those parts of me that are so important. Yeah,
that's right.
And it's sometimes hard to face, but man, when you can, and when you can give yourself compassion and forgiveness for that, it allows you to move forward in a better place.
Yeah. This has been absolutely amazing. And I know we can continue to talk. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your perspective, because I think it's important for women, especially now, to start thinking bigger and realizing that we can still be a success, but we can still be an amazing mom at the same time and still find time for us. So.
And coming together as women in this space and hearing it from other women as well, I think is so beautiful. We've been connecting with so many women that have this message, and it fills my heart so much to see that this is a space that is being created, and a space that we can all collectively come together and even add more value. So thank you so much for being here and adding so much value and telling us your story and allowing others to learn from your story and from your message. I think that's so beautiful. Now, you have developed the business of happiness that is you. And now you are offering coaching as well, which I just think is everything, because I think who we surround ourselves with matters, and who we allow to have as mentors in our life matters. And you are opening up that space for women. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. It's something I feel so passionately about now, in that I feel like I've unlocked the secret of how to find fulfillment and to be our best selves at work and at home. And so I'm just so passionate about helping other women, guiding them on their journey of finding that inner fulfillment at work. If you have to go to work, if you own a business, if it's been your dream and your passion, and now you've lost that spark in it and you're beginning to feel that resentment I was talking about earlier, then that's the moment you need to try to tap into what it was that lit you up about that. And even if you find yourself in a job that's lackluster and you know there's something better out there for you, knowing how to find happiness and joy and possibility and the lessons in the moment that you have, so that you can find the courage to move on to a different position or to create something new for yourself. And so that's what the prosperity coaching is all about. And I just love it, because I love being in that arena with women one-on-one and helping them find their truth in their everyday, and to see the success and the joy that comes out of it is so rewarding for me. And that's what fills me up.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. It's such an amazing space to be in, for sure. And so I appreciate that you're putting that out there and helping women, guiding them through that. If you have found joy and happiness in this episode, please share it with other people. We would love, love, love you to have a share. Check out Tarryn's podcast, The Business of Happiness.
Thank you.
She's got an amazing, amazing podcast that talks about a lot of this mentality in this space. So we are very grateful to be sharing this space with you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being here and adding so much value. Make sure you find her on Instagram, and you can find us on Instagram as well. Come join us on Thursdays for Bevy and BS for our casual breakdown of the weeks and whatever it is that we feel we need to talk about in those moments. It's a nice space to connect. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. As always, thank you to the group at Next Level University. Could not be here running a very technically evolved podcast without you. We love you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Tarryn.
Bye.
Bye.